I think I'm healthier now with this disease than I was 20 years ago. I guess with everything, I'm the person, as I said, I'm the person I am because of my disease, but not everyone would agree with that. Not everyone has the same reactions. A friend here at Melbourne said to me after I was diagnosed I was going to be dead in 12 months. That was 14 years ago. When I moved into the estate here in Collingwood, I moved in here to die. Hi Stephen, I was born in Blacktown in 1961. Originally moved from Sydney. I don't know how to put this without, I don't want to make it sound like my family didn't care, because I don't believe that's the case. I just think they didn't understand. The reasons for coming here were to have a blood test. And knowing that I was 99% sure I had HIV, I couldn't go home to mum and say, well, this is the situation, when HIV was still branded as a gay plague. May 1995 I was diagnosed, and the doctor turned around to me after one blood test and said, well, the prognosis isn't good. And I said to myself, well, I've got HIV, but what else have I got? Because I was 99% sure I had it. I had a series of episodes, I'll call them, I don't know whether that's the right word, but I had night sweats, I had a rash on my body that wasn't right, and I had a lump in the groin the size of an egg that just didn't make sense. Turned out that was all painting a bigger picture, as a friend here in Melbourne said to me. And I think honestly, I was never afraid of having an HIV test, but if he turned around and said, well look, you've got something else, I probably would have fallen apart. If he'd said I had cancer or something. If it wasn't, if all this bigger picture wasn't what I assumed it was, and he said, look, you've got gonorrhea or you've got something else, I probably would have fallen apart. But I was so ready for what he told me, and the fact that at least I thought I was. Yeah, so that was it. I couldn't go home. I couldn't go home and tell mum I had this disease when no one understood it. I didn't understand it. Mum and dad don't understand my life, and I've only found out recently that after 20 years they've never accepted my life. I told mum in 1989 that I was gay, and I found out last year when I went to South Africa to get married that she just couldn't accept it. And she'd never accepted my life after 2 decades, and here I thought I was making progress. Eating away slowly and not sort of rattling sabres and sort of saying, well, you have to accept this. But I like to think that if I was in her, I like to think that if the roles were reversed and I was in mum and dad's position, that I could accept my son's decision. A friend of mine said to me, when I hadn't told mum the reason why I was going to South Africa, he turned around and said, well, how would you feel if your son made a monumental life change and didn't tell you? And mum just sort of thought, no, I just can't accept this. And yet I was supposed to, and this hurts me, because then in December last year I was to go home and play Happy Families for their 50th wedding anniversary, which I did. But it was sort of niggling at me from the point of view of the fact that they couldn't accept my marriage. And okay, I didn't get married in the end, but that's beside the point. The fact that I was supposed to be getting married, and mum couldn't accept my life choice, as it were. So I had no future, I didn't think. 3 years after, 1998, so it was three years after my diagnosis, I snapped and threw 40 Valium down my throat in a vain attempt to end it all. And the cry for help, which was what it was, I got, I guess, the counselling that I needed, and I cried out to a friend, and I rang Greg and I left this horrific message on his answering machine, and because he didn't answer the phone. And within minutes of that, my doctor rings me, and I'm thinking, my God, how did you find out? And Greg had played the message on the answering machine to my doctor because he couldn't instill the terror in my voice, was exactly how he put it. And it was a whole lot of things. It was my diagnosis, it was an acceptance of my parents, it was, well, put it this way, life wasn't This wasn't what I planned. After the suicide attempt, I spent about a week or so with this friend of mine at Yarraville, and I went to work with him one day, and it was 38, I remember distinctly, it was stinking hot. And I went upstairs into the hotel above reception to go to the bathroom or something, and I came to the top of the stairs and I just fainted in the heat, but it was all the stress and everything else, and I just did a Sylvester down the stairs and just melted down the stairs at the back of reception. Of course, Greg suddenly heard this horrific noise and found me passed out on the floor at the bottom. Picked me up, took me back into the back room behind reception and sat me down. I just eventually came around. I said, I can't handle this, and I was just an absolute mess. And he said, darling, this is depression, get used to it. People don't, even after 25 years, I don't believe people understand how this disease works. And another friend of mine here in Melbourne who runs an organisation called Youth Empowerment Against HIV believes, and I believe, and we agree, that AIDS became a dirty word and no one would talk about it. And both of us, Alicia Ross and I, both had this being our bonnet of getting people to talk about things and getting people to talk about AIDS and talk about the whole thing. Don't be afraid to talk about it. My whole life changed when I started studying in 2005, and to my horror, or maybe I shouldn't have been so horrid, but so surprised, Swinburne had done nothing on any campus at all ever about HIV until I arrived. And my web page is still linked, I believe, into their human resources web page, and I like to think I infected Swinburne with HIV/AIDS awareness. And the campaign that I did a campaign as a part of my community development diploma, and that campaign to this day is still running on campus, and I go back down there every now and then just to make sure they still have everything. But yeah, there was everything in their webpage about heart disease, diabetes, you name it, but nothing about the worst public health crisis in human history. So I found a gap. I believed I found a gap in education. I created the Australian Student AIDS Campaign, which is an organisation, well, I'm it, but basically it's a point of contact, and students from any high school, college, university or whatever can contact me. There's a blog spot in Blogger, and I will talk to anyone about HIV who will listen. As someone said once before about another issue altogether, if I can reach one person, I've made a difference. And I believe I have reached more than one person.